In this section, we're going to look at one of the qualities of church, according to Loefing. The church remembers. And the topic that he is going to use to talk about how the church needs to remember to be church is the unity of Israel and the new Israel. In other words, the unity of the Jewish tradition and the Christian church, the Church of Christ today. All right, so this is an area which we have seen some forgetting. All right. In other words, what we've done as Christians, especially in the Middle Ages, really got away from what the early church taught, right? Now, remember, in Christianity, we see ourselves as the continuation of the faith of the apostles, right? The people who knew Jesus. And that's what we try to do, is pass on this seed of faith from the apostles and live it out in our lives today. And so it's important for us to remember what they actually believed, what they actually taught, how they actually lived. And in this case, when it comes to the relationship between the people of God, the Jews, and the new people of God, the church, we forgot for a while. We really did get off track with the beliefs and the teachings and the lives of the apostles. So let's look at how that happened and also how we have remembered and corrected it. So the first thing Loefing points out in this section will remind you a lot of what we've seen with Brendan Byrne, and that he is stressing the unexpectedness of the way that the messianic promises were fulfilled. In Jesus and the church founded on him, Israel's history once again takes one of those turns no one expected, right? One that overturns everything. It's usually forgotten that what happened in Galilee and afterwards in Jerusalem was not something strange and alien to Israel. It was Jewish history, right? This was something that happened in a Jewish context, to a Jewish community, right? It was a promise fulfilled to the Jews. The actors were, without exception, Jews. Jesus was a Jew. Mary was a Jew. All the apostles were Jews. Now, this might seem obvious, but we do need to remind Christians of this. Because as the church came into existence in Israel, it understood itself. The early Christians understood themselves as a fulfillment of the prophecies of the eschatological Israel, gathered together by God to bring God's grace to the whole world. And so let's remember that it was a Jewish movement embraced by Jews. That was the early church. That is where our faith was born. So as time went on, at first all the Christians were Jews. But as time went on, within a couple decades, you started to see more Gentile members of the church than Jews. So by the end of the first century, there's more non-Jews that believe Jesus is the Messiah than there are the Jews that believe Jesus is the Messiah. Furthermore, the majority of Jews in the world did not believe Jesus was the Messiah. This included the rabbis in Rome. The rabbis in Jerusalem, right? The center of the Jewish world. They did not believe that Jesus was the Messiah, and they sent out letters to all the synagogues, all the Jewish churches all over the world, condemning the idea that Jesus was the Messiah. And they also even said, kick out people who think that Jesus was the Messiah. So there was kind of a schism within Judaism. We had a minority of Jews who believed that Jesus was the Messiah, and the majority of Jews who didn't. And the Jews who didn't rejected the idea and even rejected the people who said that Jesus was the Messiah, kicking them out of the synagogues, not allowing them to take place in the communal worship, which is like saying you can't be part of the people of God if you believe in it. So you did have kind of a split within Judaism because of that, but you still have two Jewish groups, right? Now, as we saw earlier, eventually St. Peter, St. Paul, And some others start to baptize Gentiles and bring them into the church. They said, you don't have to become Jewish first. And so that movement is born. St. Paul was originally one of these Jews who was very upset about the idea that people were saying Jesus was the Jewish Messiah. And he used to go around and round up Jews in other cities and bring them back to Jerusalem in chains to be punished for saying that Jesus was the Messiah. He was a bounty hunter of Christians. But one time on one of these journeys, he had a vision. And in this vision, he met the risen Christ. And the risen Christ said to him, "Why are you persecuting me?" Now, St. Paul had never met the risen Christ with the glorified body before Christ ascended. And he never met the incarnate Christ before the crucifixion. So in this vision, if Christ is telling him, "Why are you persecuting me?" Christ is saying, I am my church. By persecuting the believers in Christ, the members of the Christian communities, those Jews who believed Jesus was the Messiah, Paul was actively persecuting Christ himself. In other words, from the beginning, Paul understood that the church was Christ's body on earth. And so Paul wondered, why, if this is the promise to the Jews, are so many of my fellow Jews, right? Why do so many of us not recognize our own Messiah? And he looked back, of course, like any good Jew would, back to the Old Testament prophets, and he found this image of an olive tree for Israel.